Welcome to Orthodox Family Life. Today we have three lovely ladies joining us to discuss a question that was recently posted on Instagram and prompted a lot of great discussion. We all know that there has been a wave of recent converts to the church, and glory to God for that. But most of the converts are men, some say about 70%. So today we'll be discussing why there are not as many women currently joining the church, and maybe have some ideas about ways that we can begin to change that. So welcome to the show, ladies.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Yeah, so let's start with Melissa, and if maybe everyone could introduce themselves. Tell us about yourself and what you do.
Okay. I'm Melissa Cecilia. Christina, thank you so much for putting this on. I think this is a fabulous topic. I'm really excited to talk to you guys about this and hear your points of view. But yeah, I'm Melissa Cecilia. I am north of Dallas, Texas. I go to St. Nicholas Orthodox Church in McKinney. I've been Orthodox almost 5 years now. I'm a convert. I've converted from being a yogi, if you will. I was really big into yoga. Now I'm a personal trainer, so I work for a living. I'm not married. And I run my own business. So most of my clients are not Orthodox, but I have a pretty heavy Orthodox life on the weekends with church, and I help Father Seraphim with his social media. So that's kind of what my life looks like now. I have my companion is a little shih tzu named Fooshie, who's in the back right now being good. So that's a little bit about me.
All right, thanks, Melissa. And Mariana, what about you?
Yeah, hi, my name is Mariana. My friend's family call me Anna, so that's also that's easier. You can use that. I go by both, but I currently live in Eastern Pennsylvania. I'm from more South Central Pennsylvania. My husband and I's sort of home parish is Holy Apostles in Mechanicsburg. I have such I'm so grateful for my conversion, but it did sort of take a while. And so my story starts sort of as a child. I was raised in an Anabaptist home, but a very musical home, and a home that loved beauty and art. And so I grew up as actually an actress and a musician. And then my husband and I were best friends through middle school and high school. And I went to school in New York. He went to school outside of Philadelphia, which is where we are now. And COVID happened our senior year. So we ended up staying in this area at this amazing parish here in Souderton, Pennsylvania, St. Philip's in Souderton. Father Noah is the archpriest, the rector there. And we're so grateful. And I have been teaching for the past several years. And COVID made that more of a necessity as the arts really shut down. So the music world was dead for a long time, music and theater world. And that became a huge blessing, as much as it was a horrifying reality for so long. But I started teaching, and I ended up getting, I say, poached to this Orthodox school from a school that I was at. And I'm so grateful for that. They took a huge chance on me as a young teacher, but I was able to be there for 3 years. I did just recently step back, hoping to continue with some more of the theater work that I did there. But I was running the music department, stepping back as my husband and I are just about to move here to seminary in like 2 weeks, which is a little nuts. But that's the next part of my story, which is not written yet, and I don't know what that's going to look like, but I'm really grateful. My husband is a very faithful man, and having been with him for about 10 years now, that's about how long I've been exposed to the Orthodox Church, and I'm so grateful for that. He is a huge blessing to me, and I've loved bringing my family into that. And so I also have this Instagram, which we'll talk, I'm sure, about tonight. But I run an Instagram that sort of exposes what Orthodoxy looks like in sort of a real, I say a soft way, a soft reality, which I think is not very prominent online in the Orthodox space, especially for women. So that's sort of become a new mission for me, which I hope to explore more in the next couple of years, because I think I'll have the time to do that, which I'm grateful for, even though I'm expecting my third. I'm in my third trimester with my third. So if I'm out of breath at all tonight, that is why.
Thank you, Mariana. And it's exciting to hear that you're going to seminary. And I have a book recommendation for you, by the way. I know a great book about written by our friend Matushka here about what it's like to be the wife of a priest. So we'll hook you up afterwards and tell you about it.
That's great. Good to know. Thank you.
And so thanks for being here. And so Matushka, our old friend Matushka, is back. Great to see you as always. And maybe just catch up anybody who hasn't met you before.
Yeah, so my husband and I live on the island of Newfoundland, and he serves the only Orthodox parish in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. I'm a social worker. I currently work in a policy role, but worked on the front line for about 8 years. We've lived on the island for 12 years. Prior to that, we lived in Greece. We studied theology there. So I have my master's degree in iconography, actually, in the theology of icons. That's sort of like that's my part-time job. I guess my part-time job, 2 full-time jobs would be being a priest wife and having a full-time job. Yeah. So, and I also have written some books. So a lot of people don't actually necessarily know my face, but they'll often know my book covers. So I'm at my mom's house now visiting in New Brunswick. But so this is my first book, The Sin of Holiness, Lessons from a Women's Monastery. It's about my experiences with nuns in Greece. So lots of insight into what it's like to live the Orthodox faith and the spiritual life as a woman that I was able to gain from being with the nuns for about 5 or 6 years that we lived in Greece. The second one is prior to Greece, we had lived in South Korea, which also has had Orthodoxy for over 100 years. So the sweetness of grace, stories of Christian trial and victory are different stories, collection of stories from our time in Greece, from my time studying theology at an Orthodox university. Aristotle University in Thessaloniki is an Orthodox university. Means the theology department is Orthodox, and different stories in South Korea, different things. And then when Mariana said, "We'll see what that book of my life will look like," and I laughed and thought it might look a little bit like this. It's just published by a Canadian publisher. The other 2 are published by Ancient Faith. And this book, I called it Upon This Rock because the island of Newfoundland is nicknamed the Rock. Because as you can tell here, this is actually the town of St. John's. This is entering the harbor of the city. All the houses are built on stone because there's very shallow earth there. So that's what we called it, Upon This Rock. So it's reflections of what it's like to be married and to a priest and serve an Orthodox mission for over almost 12 years now, I guess. So over a decade. So, and Christina and I are best friends. And the whole world knows it now after our life series.
Yeah, we had one about I think 2-hour conversation privately before we recorded the first one. We're like, okay, that's it. We're best friends now. So, yeah. Okay, so again, thanks for everyone for being here. I'm really excited about this. Let's start with Mariana and tell us about what you posted and then about some of the reactions you got in general.
Sure. Yeah. I've been sort of on this mission the past year to use my Instagram stories. I have a small following. It's not like I have this massive Instagram, not in like the influencer space yet, but what I'm grateful for with the following I have is a very diverse Orthodox following, I would say. And I have tried to use my stories as a space to have conversation. Something I noticed within the Orthodox realm is there's a lot of recent converts who have Instagrams and will often post what is Orthodoxy, but I often see it as it's what Orthodoxy is to them or at their parish. And I've seen sometimes some things that are said that maybe don't accurately represent what the Orthodox frenema might be in a certain regard. And so on my stories, I've been posting for the past about a year now, a little over a year, just as people ask me questions, instead of me answering them in my perspective, which I sometimes do, I put them out for other people to give their perspectives as well. And I don't always just post the things that I necessarily agree with or want to talk about, but I think they're the conversations that are meant to be had. But I prompted this discussion as I think a lot of the DMs that I was getting. Sorry, let me rephrase that. So the talk in the Orthodox world right now is a lot about the mass conversions happening in America, which is beautiful. And hear me out. I think men are wonderful. I'm so grateful for our church fathers. I'm so grateful for our priests, our bishops, all the people leading these discussions, but they have all been men that I have heard. And so oftentimes the conversation comes in, whether it's podcast form or YouTubers or the Ortho Bros online, which, everyone likes to talk about it. They want to talk about all these men coming and bringing their families. But what I noticed was there were not many women talking about why we are not seeing women in these mass conversions. And I think a lot of it was just sort of like mentioned in conversation in these podcasts or YouTube videos of, okay, well, it's because of feminism. So, okay, just because of feminism, but look at all these men joining. So I wanted to start the conversation of, okay, so what are we actually feeling? What are people actually feeling? The people that follow me are not all Orthodox, and they've made that very clear. And I've had a lot of conversations in my DMs of people reaching out, kind of saying, where is the space for me? You know, whether I'm Catholic or Protestant or whatever, where's the space for me within Orthodoxy? What is the Orthodox perspective on blank? As a woman, where do you find yourself? And I was just seeing a lot of that. So I wanted to open the conversation so that people could give their real perspectives. And I wanted most of the conversations happening in my stories come from women who are Orthodox, giving their perspective on things, how they're living their life. This is maybe one of my favorites because the women who follow me who are not Orthodox had their voices heard the most. And I was able to kind of show, okay, these are real perspectives from women on why they are not in the space that we feel is so welcoming, and so many of us feel is welcoming. But I loved the amount of people who reached out and were very honest, and I thought that was really important. And so, not that, you know, generally the men I hear in these podcasts talking about, you know, our massive wave in the West of returning to traditionalism and all this. We say it's so beautiful, and it is, but I'm not saying that's wrong to have those conversations, but I did actually want to see what women would put their voices forward. So that's sort of the story of the Instagram post and what happened. I did turn it into a highlight, so it is still on my Instagram if people are interested in looking it up. My Instagram is called A Little Liturgical Life. It's
We'll link it below.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's called that actually because I'm 5 foot, so it's sort of the joke on my height at first, but it is just a little bit of my life too. So that's part of it. But if you look at the highlight, the amount of people who responded who were very honest and who are not Orthodox or who were recent converts and talked about the hardships that they had coming in, I was very inspired by people's honesty. And some things people might read and they might not be happy with, but I think it's important to listen.
Yeah. Thanks so much for that. I think you're right. Like, we need to actually hear what people are saying instead of just assuming that we know why the ladies are not coming to the church. And that's a great place to start, is just by listening. And I also want to talk about maybe for a minute that, you know, the church is for everyone. I think we all realize that and know that the church is for everyone. The gospel is for everyone. So there is one sense that, you know, if you have videos about theological understanding or history, that's for everybody. It's not specific to men. But I think maybe what we're talking about is there's a lot of, at least what I see is a lot of channels that are processing the Orthodox faith in a very male way, whether that's through debate or kind of very high energy, very, you know, aggressive maybe content. And that's, I think for me, at least as a lady, that would turn me off. I don't sit there and listen to that. It's not what I'm looking for. So, you know, there is content out there that women can partake in, obviously, but we're talking about really content geared towards women that speaks to where women are. Actually, let's just go over the 4 categories. So we have feminism and more other toxic cultural influences. There was a lot of answers about the sisterhood, we could say. We'll get into that in community, Protestant baggage, and online orthodoxy. So let's start with the first one. And these were some of these are paraphrased. Some of these are direct quotes from the answers that you got about conversion. So I'll just read through them and then we can discuss them. So under feminism and toxic cultural influences, people said that they felt like women were lied to, that a traditional life is repressive, that women lean super liberal, orthodoxy at odds with feminism, the world's version of orthodoxy is wrong, millennial women are the most lied to in society, told that they need autonomy, independence, power, money, choice. The church teaches self-denial. And you see young women and families coming in because in family life you are taught self-denial, so they have that connection. Traditional feminism is portrayed as, traditional living as a woman is portrayed as weak and slavish. Females are taken with social media and the new age, go with the flow, and a tendency towards being trendy for women, and left-leaning because they are empathetic and compassionate. It's a good impulse, but it gets misdirected. Sorry for my poor reading there, but hopefully that made sense. So anyone want to start with some thoughts on this idea of Feminism being one of the main drivers of why women are not converting?
I have a thought. If you don't
Go
mind,
ahead.
I will share.
Yes.
Not all of the responses that I got are things that I did share in my stories, whether
Mhm.
that be, maybe they were repeated topics, or like people had already spoken enough and I was like, well, we don't need 300 of the same answer. But the other thing was language, because I think, some people were very happy to tell me their thoughts, and not all of it was something I wanted to necessarily post. But a thought that had been presented, which I'm sort of opening for discussion, is the idea that, and it was language that I didn't post this, but men are uncomfortable in our society right now. So they're searching for something more. They're searching for community. And the general thought would be that women are very comfortable in our society right now, in terms of the way that the culture is trending towards empowerment and towards, women trying to, have it all. This idea that it's sort of like we're given a formula for the way to live. And I think the idea that was presented was, well, men aren't quite given that formula, so they're searching and they're uncomfortable and they want help. And women aren't necessarily given the idea that they need help, or they need something greater than what's presented in front of them. I loved that perspective. I thought there was a lot of truth to that. And I'm super paraphrasing, but I mean, it very much fits within, I think, this category of where the culture is leaning right now.
You guys are going to have to help us out, because I feel like I'm the one that's kind of isolated. This isn't really my thing. I don't think I ever fell into a lot of feminist ideas, but I can see it in the culture now. And I think you're right. It does kind of piggybacking on what you're saying. I see that a lot of women, maybe what they're being told is to live a certain way, right? And I see this in trends. That remark about trendiness, what really stuck out to me, because you see these waves of, okay, now we're all going to do this. Now we're all going to do that. And the women kind of clump together and just do it. There doesn't seem to be a lot of individual thinking. But yeah, if you're in that mindset of always going with the flow, always doing what the group is doing, you're never going to have that self-reflection that you kind of need to begin a journey into the church, I think.
I think that's sort of how I would think of it as well. I mean, I'm not sure what that person meant exactly. What I would assume what they meant, though, is current society, North American society, has pushed women to the forefront to be like, you are the ones that take power now, and you are the ones that dictate, the fate of your own life, and you don't need to listen to anybody else. And to me, it boils down to the individual perspective of like, but if you sit alone with yourself, are you at peace? Do you have animosity with people? Do you actually feel like, when you step back from the busyness of your life, when you step back from the busyness of your career and your, maybe the activities that you kind of engage in, do you feel at peace? Because I think unless it starts with an individual, it won't be a mass movement. I don't believe it won't be a mass conversion of, oh, let's switch the culture this way and then women will come into it. Women are by nature more spiritual than men. That's natural. It's like Yerna Ephraim used to say, if the Holy Mountain could have women, there would be no room for men, because women are naturally more spiritual. But as I believe it's St. Sophrony says, women, though, because they have that ability, sometimes they get stuck on the level of the psychological and they don't push up to the peak of spiritual life. So it really boils down to each individual person being honest with themselves and saying, okay, I have all of this. The world has told me I ought to be comfortable with my life the way it is. And the question I would want to ask people, and the question, just like when I was on the front line as a social worker, it all boils down to the person. Like, what do you think when you step back from a situation, from a crisis, whatever it may be? You need to yourself reflect on it. And maybe the answer for some people will be like, yeah, I'm at peace, I'm happy, it's all good. But until someone allows themselves that moment of listening to their inner voice, I don't think I don't necessarily know what other catalyst there would be for them to push outside of what the world has told them is their due. It's our time now. For all the history of the world, it's been man's time. Now it's woman's time. And that's appealing. Of course it's appealing, right? Because we all sort of want to have our own way. And it's nice to feel like you are the decision maker and you are the driving force and it's all up to you. But at the end of the day, when you sit and reflect on your own inner life, are you at peace and do you feel fulfilled? That's just how I see it, as at least as an opening to looking at that. The world's not going to push people to become Orthodox. The reason why men are being pushed to become Orthodox is because the world's pushing against them. Like, it's not the world has facilitated it in a good way. The world's done it in a negative way. So they feel isolated, you know? And so they seek something that will give them that stability that they feel the world has pulled away from them. So that's my perspective on it, because like Christina mentioned, this isn't really like, I don't really come from a feminist background, but I do come from many years of being very intimately familiar with nuns. And I would say the true feminism, you'll find in an Orthodox women's monastery. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean just being a man. It means being a woman in the most perfect sense. And you see that in the characters of sanctified people, many of whom are women.
Yeah, I love what Matushka just said about having to sit in silence and kind of contemplate, are you at peace? And agree that it's going to be on an individual basis, because we are go with the flow. We are women of, we like community. We like to do what everyone else is doing. And a lot of us are women in general in the secular world are going to more new age, because I agree, we're very spiritual. We need something. And there's all these women. I would disagree with the men saying we're just feminists and we don't care about the truth. I think there are a lot of women that are looking, but until they really, really, really want the truth, they're not going to find it outside of Orthodoxy. But there's not a channel for us. Everything from my perspective, this is my background, is pushing us into new age and yoga and meditation and things like that. That's where all the women are going. Crystals and healers and Reiki and energy healing, sound baths, retreats, meditation retreats, maybe ayahuasca, things like that. That's kind of our thing. We don't need men. And the reason that's enticing, I think, is because, yes, we've been brainwashed with feminist ideas from birth, and that's not 100% our fault. That's society's fault. But also the reality that most secular men are not good leaders. And there really is abuse. There really are bad men. And when we have been submissive in the past, just our nature is calling us to be, we want to be followers. When we've done that, our experience has shown us that that's bad news. So we've written that off a long time ago. So now what do? Well, now we're spiritual. We can't get around it. We're going to be depressed if we're not some kind of spiritual. So now we have yoga, where you don't have to talk to anyone, which is good, because you can be in your own space and your own mat or your own whatever kind of new age healing you want to be. And then you really do kind of feel some kind of, I would say, fake peace. It's not the peace of Jesus Christ, but it'll get you through for a while when you're starving. And I think that's where most, from my perspective, where a lot of women are ending up, because there's some power there, because they're so desperate for peace, the peace that Matushka was talking about, but that's not the right one. But we don't have a lot of content like this online where, because all the women are doing this. And so it's like, well, it must be here. I must not be meditating hard enough. I must not have the right crystals. I must not be taking enough ayahuasca. I need to connect with Mother Nature. It's me. So I would disagree a little with that Instagram person that said that women, what were you saying, that they, I lost my train of thought, but that we don't feel broken, that we don't feel like we need help. I certainly think a lot of them feel extremely broken and need help. They're not going to show it out of pride, but not in a bad way. Like, they're just so broken that they're willing to try anything. So that's where they find themselves. And then I don't know the answer of how to get them to Orthodoxy. I think men are so much finding themselves as outcasts because their masculinity has been challenged. Where can I go be a man? So they're all like, where do I go? Where do I go? And then online's like, come to Orthodoxy, come to Catholicism, come to Islam, let's put men over here, where women are women. And they're like, okay, well, which one? So they have this pipeline that's pretty easy, and they're online anyway. They're doing video games. they're, you know, they like debating, so they're into debates, and we've got these great characters in Orthodoxy that are debating, and they're doing a great job and just pulling them in. Whereas women, what do? You know, we don't really have that person that's in a yoga class being like, hey guys, that piece you're looking for is in the Orthodox Church. You know, it's anyway, so that's kind of, I guess, just what popped into my mind. But they're really, I think it does start on an individual basis, and the individual on a soul level, heart level, has to really, really want God and the truth, and you'll find it if you're really looking, because it's out there. I don't know. I don't have the right answer of where that pipeline is for us at the moment.
Well, I think I remembered my thought now. What Matushka was saying about monasteries is really ties into what you just said, Melissa, that the female monastics being that model and that image of true feminine spirituality, but monastics are often very, hidden, as they should be. So that's hard, right? The model is there, but you do have to seek it out, unless you get Matushka's great book that can give you a little window into their life. But that's something I wish we could show people more of, is not the Instagram version of what it means to be a monastic or something, but the real monastic life, especially women's monasteries, where you see women being joyful and submissive and hardworking and just cooperative. This is hard for women. Let's be honest.
For us,
Yeah.
But a lot of that is because it's bound by a common love. So many years ago, like 2008, I was at a women's monastery. It was helpful because I was trying to learn the Greek language. So I would go there for a bit of time to try to help just be immersed in the language. And Elder Eusebius Vitis, who is basically about to be canonized, will be canonized. He's a holy elder. He had visited the monastery and he gave a little talk to all of the nuns. And one of the things he described was, and I realized afterwards, St. John Chrysostom, it's actually a quote from St. John Chrysostom, but he said, if everyone around it has Christ at the center and their love is directed toward Christ, then everyone will draw closer together as they draw closer to Christ. And I feel like that's the only pipeline we're going to be able to present to people. It's not going to be an authentic pipeline that's going to transform people, is by us communally, wherever we are, because there is no distance in the spiritual life, by us loving Christ and seeking to ourselves become purified of the passions, to become our transformed perfect selves through the grace of God and through repentance, then that draws us together, and that will give people that feeling of community and that feeling of, even without knowing other people, even without knowing their example, that's how the grace of God is communicated. It's communicated through us as individual people becoming sanctified. And then that's like sound waves that even if you don't hear it, it's, a dolphin can hear things that the human ear can't hear. It's the same as the soul. The soul hears things that the human ears doesn't hear. It gets communicated in the spiritual sound waves. And all of that is available to us. For me, living on an isolated island, literally by myself, that I am literally the only example of orthodoxy for people, which is horrifying. That's at least that's a comfort to know. There are people out there. There are ascetics out there. When we used to walk, because we didn't own a car when we first moved there, when we used to walk to church to do liturgy at 5 a.m., I would look up at the trees and I would think, take courage, because there's an ascetic, there's multiple ascetics, women and men, that are out there praying for you. And I feel like as women who are more spiritual, we need to start to really push this, let's take our spiritual lives as women seriously. And for some people, it will mean these amazing Instagram things that actually give beautiful insight into it. And for someone else, it'll just be the way you conduct yourself as a personal trainer. And people will see the nuances of a sanctified personality, or of a personality that's being sanctified, and they'll be themselves influenced by it.
Yeah, that's always the answer to everything, isn't it? That we've talked about in the past, dig into your own spiritual life.
Especially because it's not easy for people to go to women's monasteries. And when they do, a lot of times they get disappointed, not to women's, just in general. If you read about Mount Athos and then you go to a monastery, you have a negative experience. Or, I've had people contact me and be like, I read your book, I thought it would be this way, but I actually felt totally alone and no one talked to me. And because people start to have preconceived notions of what it'll be like. you know?
Mm-hmm.
So if you can go to a monastery, it's amazing. Go make a pilgrimage. But if you can't, there's other things that are available to us as seekers, and then there's things that are available to us as Orthodox Christians seeking Christ, who that we all communally wish for the whole world to find Christ, so that they can know the peace that we have found in Christ.
Mm.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned a little bit about community and sisterhood, which was the next thing on the list.
Mhm.
This idea that women really need that, it seems like, more than the men do. They need that community. And a lot of people, Mariana, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I won't read it this time, but a lot of the women talked about um, not having a community, not seeing their place in the community. Like, you hear this a lot from young single women, like everyone in the church is married or they have kids or they're older. When I converted at 18 in 1995, a long time ago, I was the only person my age at 18 between 11 and 30. So I completely understand this, which is why, in part, I moved to California, um, to a place where there was a lot of young people. So I really understand that when you have no one who's like you in the same place, it's really, really difficult. And I think men are maybe more okay without having that, but the women really seem to need that. So any thoughts on that? That need for community, or maybe even the need for good community, because the other side of this category was kind of the negative impact of being around women who maybe were encouraging you, in a bad way.
I would say, I'm a little bit older, but also being single, I think it's a blessing to be different. A lot of times, the more you struggle in general, and say, this is the truth. I came here on my own. I want God. It doesn't matter what's going on in the church. You're there. So the people, whatever the situation is, I mean, the church is full of people, and you're going to be up against all sorts of things. And you are in the minority if you're a single girl. Because there's a lot of families, and it's a beautiful thing. And I think it's good for your soul to be around families. It softens you a little bit, especially if you're only around single people all the time, that does shape you a little bit. I don't think it's necessarily bad, but it's nice to be around people with kids. You start to learn how to deal with kids. You start to learn what it looks like to be a nurturer. And so that community aspect, you become part of the community. So even if you don't have kids, or even if you're not married or whatever it is, you kind of blend. So I would agree. It could be very difficult to be the odd woman out, but you can also become friends with different type of women, and they will make you better, and you will make them better just by being different. And I think we all come with value to the church, and we're not there by accident. We're supposed to be there. And someone once told me, you need to grow where you were planted. And so I think there's hurdles in everything in life. And if a little bit of being different is going to make you leave a church, I would hope that's not the case. There's so many benefits to being different in life in general. And I think becoming Orthodox in general, you've already signed up for being different. So once one tiny little extra thing, so that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was a little bit into the punk rock scene as a kid, and that being different and kind of being on the peripheral, I actually think helped me a lot in the Orthodox life, in the the spiritual life, because I didn't follow all those trends. I kind of always had an aversion to them, and I see a lot of women, unfortunately, fall into that. Like, they're really uncomfortable if they're not, like, maybe 10 years ago, my girls were in a homeschool co-op. A lot of really wonderful Protestant ladies, but they seemed to all like go through the same clothing at the same time. They all had like the big hats and the flower dresses, and the moms had like the puffy vest and then the jeans and the boots. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, there were these things that everyone kind of did at the same time. And just looking at my kids, no, you have clothes. You're not going to go buy new clothes no, we're not doing that. Sorry. So I do think women need to maybe cut ties a little bit. You can be friends with anybody. I've some of my best friends are older women who really nurture me in a different way than people my own age would, especially when I was younger. And those are the friendships I just super value, that older women, especially, that poured that love into me and, helped me to see what it was like to be an Orthodox woman.
maybe that's where I love that this is where this conversation has gone, because I think in many ways our culture has like spoiled us a little bit with almost always giving us an opportunity to just be around people that are like us, right? So we're in school. I mean, this is very new for our world, where we're not in one-room schoolhouses with everyone. You know, we're stuck in classrooms from a small child till out of college with the same demographic of people like us, age-wise, right? And often gendered too, right? Like the girls do one thing, the guys do one thing. And I did grow up in the Protestant church and the Anabaptist faith, and which did very much leaned evangelical as I got older. But the heavy youth group scene as a young girl, as a 10 to 18-year-old, was very much divided by age and gender, right? So we were always around the people just like us. And I do think it's sort of a new idea that our churches should do the same. And so I want to agree with that point, right? That I think it's interesting that so many people are yearning for, well, you know, the Protestant churches have all these women's Bible studies, you know, the 30-year-old single women's Bible studies, or the 30 to 40 young mother, like it's very, you know, we are in these boxes. I think it's interesting. So many people want that. I will say, to empathize, it can also be so hard to be in a certain phase of life when you see everyone else around you in a different phase of life. And that was brought up a lot, right? Like one of the things that was brought up a lot was young women saying, we want to find a place we want to be poured into the way we see people pouring into, you know, the mothers around us. So I can empathize with that. I'm not in that place, but I can understand how that would be very hard. However, our culture really has conditioned us to sort of think that we also need to learn from the people like us. So I love what you both are saying, where you're recognizing we should be learning from older and younger. I mean, that's what culture was for forever, up until maybe like the 60s. So that's a very new thing. And I do think culture is a huge contributor to some people's just dissatisfaction with most Orthodox churches that don't have these little, you know, Sunday school classrooms for this group and this group and this group. But we're sort of all together. And that can be intimidating, I think, to come in and try to find your place within, but also beautiful. And I will echo your thoughts. I've learned so much from people who are not in my age, whether that's the young teens or the older generations. I'm grateful for that. But I see why we're like that. I see why so many people desire it or think that's what they need to learn. I understand.
Were you going to say something, Matushka?
No, I'm just thinking about like how natural it is, of course, for people to want community, but how hard that can be. Like, for example, in our parish, like our parish is actually quite different. We would say like 50% males that come and 50% females. Not that we have massive amounts, but we certainly have a lot more in the last few years than we ever did before. Our circumstances are different because it's an island. So you have that island mentality where people aren't so easily open to things that are seen as outside or other than the island culture. But, you know, some people, you're just, whatever your circumstances are, you can just feel isolated and alone. So maybe you are a single woman among all sorts of mothers, or maybe you're a mother among all sorts of grandmothers. But to me, I'm just thinking of like, even as a kid, you know, you'd read like, okay, I'm from the Maritimes. So Anne of Green Gables, although it's well known, it's, you know, this is where I'm from. I'm from the Maritimes. So you read a book like Anne of Green Gables and you feel like you're friends with Anne. Do you know what I mean? Like you actually, especially as a kid, you read books and you feel connected to the characters, and it makes you feel like you're not alone because you see similarities, you see differences, you see things you like about the character, things you don't like. And I just think to myself, if we're in circumstances, as many people would be in the parish that, you know, we have, and myself included, where you feel alone and you feel like you don't have a community, there are a host of lives of saints. So putting aside all the amazing books that exist, there are a host of lives of saints that we can read that very quickly we can start to feel like we have a community. And when things come up and whatever the circumstances may be, whether it's because we're, you know, in a working environment or in a mothering environment or in a friendship dynamic, whatever it may be, there's so many examples of that that we can read about. And if we have the habit of reading the lives of the saints regularly, then we start to notice them again and again. And you're like, when something comes up, you recall from 8 months ago when you read about a certain saint. And it just helps that it's not I understand that someone can say, look, it's not the same as having a community as being friends with Anna Green Gables in your mind. I totally get that. But the lives of the saints is actually different than the Anna Green Gables connection, because these are actually real people who still actually exist and who can communicate with us. It's Saint Euphemia from the 3rd century, who was a 12-year-old martyr in Constantinople, coming to Saint Paisius, a monk, in the 20th century on Mount Athos. He had a real connection with a person, and it's the same thing that's available to us through the lives of the saints and through just the more broader community of the church. So I would hope that people know that if you are out there and you just feel like there is no mechanism for me to build a community, or there's no community that's already built for me to be a part of it, there are, though, the lives of the saints and the cloud of witnesses in that context, that honestly reaching out to them and praying to them and reading about them 100% will make us feel less alone. When I complained about feeling so alone on the island of, when for the first however many years, we were only about 15 people on a Sunday, and the people who come don't usually, we're like lighthouse workers. We just guide people in and guide them back out, because most of the people weren't local to the island. So they'd move there to work or study, and then they would move away. So you never even got to have the same community of people. It was always changing, and when I complained about being lonely and not feeling like I had friendships, I have really great coworkers, and I really enjoyed working one-on-one with clients, but that's not the same thing. And the answer was very simple. You have your guardian angel and you have your patron saint. How many friends do you need? It's it's a helpful mindset to have.
And I totally agree. And I've always struggled with loneliness. And I think since I've been in the church, that has lessened over time, because I would tell myself the same thing. If you have Christ, why do you need anybody else? And I think that can maybe be hard for people if they haven't experienced Christ. But if you experience Christ, and like you said, the saints, St. Paisios being my favorite. I don't know if there's a word for the saint you're most connected to that's not your patron, but whatever that word is, that's what St. Paisios is for me, and it takes on a totally different dimension. I also think when I get into loneliness, I can be very selfish. And I have found that if I start to say, okay, I'm going to put away my thoughts and find someone that needs help. Maybe this person is lonely. Maybe somebody needs a phone call, and I take the initiative and I stop saying, why doesn't anyone talk to me? But then I go in and find someone, then in the end, I'm encouraged. I forget all about my own feelings of loneliness. But I think this is something women struggle with a lot.
I want to maybe take it back to the points that you had written before. In my head, this relates, so forgive me if this is not a great segue, but oftentimes it means women leaving one community to come to an Orthodox community that might not feel like they have a place in the community. And several people mentioned, well, I would be leaving my family, my faith, my family heritage, my background, my culture that I already have, to step into a culture that doesn't feel like it's there for me. It's something I can personally relate to a bit, not so much in not having a welcoming place to go. I very much did, and I'm grateful for that. I had many peers that I could relate to when I joined the church, but I did leave a significant community that, you don't mean to cut ties. It's not, but when you're thinking differently, when they have assumptions about what your faith is in the Orthodox Church, you're going to cut ties. And there's multiple communities that I there were not ties cut, but you have to sort of separate, from the world and from people who think you're joining a cult, So I really, that's a point that I really do appreciate people being honest about, whether it's leaving their family, feeling like they have to leave their family, the faith that they were raised with, or just leaving a strong community already. I know that can be very intimidating. Yeah. And Melissa, maybe I can speak with you a little bit on this. In the world that I left, the the arts, music, theater world. You had mentioned just this before, this just gravitation towards spiritualism and all that, which all my friends very much are in that space. As soon as I made my official conversion, like there just had to be a disconnect, because our faith is so strongly against what they are for. And so I personally saw a lot of ties were cut, not necessarily from my choice, but I really felt that there were just some people that just so strongly could not understand what I was doing, said some really, really hurtful things, which also goes into what young women were saying. It's hard to turn against your group of women who are trying to empower you, and then you somehow go to the patriarchy. How could you do that to women? I don't know if you can speak to that, but that is something that I did personally experience.
Yeah, 100%. I feel that. I remember at my baptism, I was crying. I hear all these stories about this was the most joyful day of my life, and they were happy and they were smiling. I was grieving because I was saying goodbye to the whole life that I knew, all of my friendships. We were so close in yoga. That was our spiritual life together, and that was glue. And so by becoming baptized and becoming an Orthodox Christian, I was very well aware that I was dying to that life and starting a new life in the unknown with Christ. I was very sad in a grieving way. I was aware of what I was doing, and I was scared, but not a coward, if that makes sense. I knew what I was doing. So I think a lot of women are right to have that concern of like, well, I'm leaving everybody behind. I don't know what I'm getting into. I'm going to be turning away from these people. I don't know what they're going to say. They could be mean, and they can, and they probably will be. And that's a hurdle that's very possible in Orthodoxy. So I understand their concern, and to go back to kind of what I was saying before, this is part of everyday Orthodoxy. I mean, this is the spiritual warfare that we go through. How much do you want to be close to Christ? How much do you care about the truth? There will be trials, and, converting is a big one. There's a lot of powers against you when you're signing your life to a different direction. So yeah, I understand their concern, and, I hope that part of it is you need to get to the point that it doesn't matter what anyone thinks. You need God so badly that you're willing to do anything. That desperation for God will get you through anything that you need to. So I think turning away from family is a very, very difficult thing. You do feel alone because now your entire faith, everything is about Christ. You think of everything about salvation and working on your passions, and you realize that the people that are so close in your life, they don't think like that. So there's this glue that you once had, even like immediate family, that you can't connect with like you can with Orthodox people. And when you're baby Orthodox, if you will, and you don't have that strong community, you don't have the sisterhood, you don't have those close friends yet, it's very, very scary. And all I can say is I hope, that they do it, because it's worth it. It's scary, and it's almost like going to battle and you're going to get smashed down and bloodied and bruised, and you just get back up and you're going the right way. It's the narrow path, and it's totally worth it. And then you finally, hopefully, will have a piece of what Matushka is talking about with that, a piece of that peace. And once you start to taste that peace, you realize, oh man, this is the way. It's worth it, even though, you're leaving what you know behind, and those people they absolutely can shun you, and say mean things and call you crazy. That's been a big one in my life. I mean, yeah, you nailed it. Being in a cult, people think it, and you can see it on their face. And how strong are you going to be? And some days you're not very strong, and you'll feel bad. But like Christina was saying, when you have your guardian angel and you have Christ, and you work on your prayer life, things can get better. So it's totally doable, but it's a battle worth doing. I think it's a battle worth doing.
100%, Melissa. And like I said, I converted at 18. I was 17, 18. And I not only didn't have anyone at church, I actually had to walk away from my entire friend group, my parents, not so much my sister, but she was having a lot of issues at the time. And I moved from Florida to California at 18, barely 18.
Wow.
And started a new life among this Orthodox community that I didn't know anybody. And the community I came into, while it was vibrant and wonderful, there was nobody like me. So I was still on the outside to a certain degree. Wasn't raised Christian. I wasn't raised in the Orthodox faith. So, but I was, like you said, just completely desperate to change and to embrace Christ. And it was like, I would do it a million times again. Like the grace that comes like nothing. My absolute worst day in the church is a million times better than one glorious day outside of the church. Like no comparison. So maybe this is what we need to be sharing with the women. That is going to be okay. Take the leap. I've never like leapt off the cliff in faith and not had God there to catch me, whether that was moving across the country or, other major life decisions like that. He's always there. If it's his will for you and he's calling you, then you just
And
have
it
to
is his will
answer.
for you, and he is calling you.
Yeah, yes.
I mean,
It is, and he is.
how many saints' lives do we see of, when they entered into like what we see as the greatest work that they did is when they left whatever they had, like the life they left, that to move from one big thing to another, whether they had to, or persecution or just their choice. I think so many saints' lives I can think of, they just had one big, okay, I'm leaving whatever it was. And I think we also just need to recognize and be open with women that you are going to, because of our current world, the persecution, if we can call it, that you're going to face is probably somewhere in regards to you are not pushing progress like you should be. You are not, women have worked so hard for you to follow your own path. Like you'll hear those things. You'll hear. I think we should just let women know that you should expect that. You should expect some pushback, and that's okay. Christ got a lot of pushback for what he was doing. It was very radical. And so if the most radical thing that a woman can do is follow Christ, I think that's awesome. Like from what so many people in this world are trying to push. But maybe that is just something for women to be aware of, that's, you'll hear things. I mean, yeah, I got the most frustrating thing for me was a very close friend of mine had said, Mariana, she just does what all the men in her life tell her to do. And that just hurt so deeply because, I had told my parents were like, yeah, right. Like you're not doing what, yeah, right. Like just, as parents would say. But for me, that was like such a gut punch because my whole life I had felt that I was who God called me to be. I really felt something like that. It was a good pride knock for me. And I'll also say that's something else some women had put in, right? Like trusting men is hard. So it looks very strange when you're going to a church to be under a spiritual father, under a bishop, under a metropolitan. I mean, I understand what that looks like, but when you know your loving father, when you know your heavenly father, and when you can fully trust, the church, it is beautiful, and to the world it might not look that way, and people might say things, and that's hard. It's very hard.
Yeah, but if people don't come from a healthy home, if people have never known a good father,
Yeah,
it's understandable that they would
yeah.
have an issue there.
And
It really is.
how many women don't have a good relationship with their own father? That's
Or
absolutely
have never had a good relationship with any man, and
anyone.
have been abused. That is a real thing. And I've been really
Absolutely.
discouraged to hear kind of people online dismissing this. It's like, this is a real thing that some women really struggle with. And they're not out there trying to be a, flaming liberal by saying they have a hard time connecting to the spiritual father. It's because they never had a father. And that's hard for them. Like we should have some compassion on that and listen and understand that that's a real thing for some women.
Yeah, and you know what's hard? The Protestant church does acknowledge that. There are so many churches that are ending gendered terminology in church because they recognize that it wounds some women who have experienced abuse. So it's hard, right? When you're looking for a church that could accept you, there are Protestant churches that are out there saying, "Don't worry, we've taken out all the hardship for you. We don't talk about a loving father because that might trigger you." So that's been a hard one for me to see, that there are churches responding to that, but it's not in truth, and it's not in goodness, and it's not in light. It's, so it is something that I do hope the Orthodox Church, people in the church can talk about more, recognizing that abuse is out there. And and women are hurt, but we don't have to take away our loving Father. We just need to show who he is more, which goes back to Matushka, what you were saying of it is just our job to be light, to just stand firm in Christ. I mean, that's what we have to do. But
and to preach the gospel of the loving Father, the prodigal son who's out there waiting, just scanning the horizon, waiting for the son to return. This is the image, and we need to tell that story, I think, over and over, to especially for women that have that issue, that
Yeah.
he's loving. Like, you might not know what that is, but you can read about it here, and you can experience his love in a safe and healthy way. It feels weird to say safe and healthy with God, but I hope you know what I mean. Like, that's Matushka.
Well, and just like that a lot, I would think that it's possible that this sort of inclination towards spirituality, to being a healer, to being all these things, that it's like the power comes through me to you. So it's like it's a bastardized version of a saint. It's like I pull the power into me and I give the power out as I will. And if I want to heal you, I will heal you. And if I don't want to heal you, I won't heal you. But with Christ, it's the complete opposite. It's literally St. John the Baptist saying, I must decrease so that he might increase. And when he increases, you actually acquire a true power. I mean, you acquire the love and the grace and the mercy of God. And that in turn is communicated outward in a way that really, I mean, you're not a healer in like a literal sense, but you become a means by which the world is healed, because just by one person becoming more sanctified, it heals the world. But it's not me. And that's why the saints could never reconcile being called saints, because they saw themselves and their passions and the temptation to sin and the inclination to sin as so strong. They saw who they were, and they saw God as the all-powerful, all-merciful, all-suffering, compassionate Lord, who, despite our sinfulness, comes and dwells within us, that the Holy Spirit comes and dwells within us. And then we, by drawing closer to Christ, like other sevies would talk about, we all draw closer together. And through that, we are actually able to positively impact the world. But the saints, because of their humility, could never see themselves. They didn't place themselves there. They didn't go out to say, I will seek the power and I will wield the power and I will do good with the power. No, they said, I must decrease so that God can increase. And that's available to all of us. It's not attractive when you first look at it, because it's the lowly way of life. It was why Christ wasn't attractive to the Jews. They were looking for a ruler who was going to put the Roman Empire in its place. But he was showing them, no, my kingdom is not of this world. My kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, is within you. And so all of that, like, desire that women are seeking for, that it's misdirected, but it's coming from a true source that we have, which is to become our most perfect self. But in order for that to happen, we need humility. And I think Melissa said it takes a lot of faith, right? Like, that's really what it is. It's first they would have to come to desire a faith. And from my experience as a social worker, the only way for that to happen is for people to genuinely develop self-awareness, to take a step back and to really think what's fueling my actions, what's fueling my behaviors, my words, all of that stuff. Where's that coming from? I need to address that first. I need to deal with that first, and it's free for everybody. It's open to everybody. And, it's not about pushing it on someone. It's about freely opening the door to say, this is for you too. You who think that I'm in a cult, it's for you. If you're interested, if you ever, if that one day, it's open, the door is always open. Sometimes we can't say that to people because even that will provoke them, but it's just to try to express that in whatever ways we can.
Yeah. I think too that people now have such a small understanding, even basic understanding of any of the real gospel. It's like we have to re-evangelize America, and which is in a way wonderful, because 30 years ago, a lot of the Protestants and Catholics were coming in, and they knew a little bit, but some of it was, a little off. But this is like a new crop of people who really don't know anything about the gospel, and we get to tell them, the real gospel, the gospel of the church and of Christ. So there's a lot of work there we could be doing, I think, on top of living our life and preaching the gospel in our lives, but also letting people know what the gospel is, that Christ loves you, that he's here to heal you. You are welcome. You are, but you just have to take up your cross and follow him, right?
You just have to do this one thing that's going to be the hardest thing for you to do.
Just this one thing.
Change everything. Yeah.
And you're going to have to do it every day and in every circumstance that greatly pains you.
Well, but there's so much grace, right? Like you just need to get through that little hump. It's kind of like exercising, probably, Melissa, right? People need to get over that initial hump of starting, and then they get the sweetness of, the reward, which is there. It's
Yeah, I
there
mean,
if
I
you
think
just start.
just like you said, suffering sometimes is really a gift from God. Thank you for bringing up personal training. I see so many similarities between exercise and our spiritual life. I had the blessing to get really, really overweight one time when I lived in New York. I topped 200 pounds, so I was really big. And I didn't care. I was having the time of my life. I ate whatever I wanted to. Everybody thought I was super funny. I had all these new friends. I drank whatever I want. Like I was just having a good time. I didn't care. Until one day I went in to go buy shoes, and remember those, maybe they're still popular, but those like boots that go all the way up to your knees. Everybody was wearing these boots. And so I went into the store. I have like little feet, size 6. And I tried to find some boots, and none of the boots fit over my fat calves. And the guy who was running the shoe store was so embarrassed. He was like, oh, well, these shoes are just running too small. And he was trying to make all these excuses. And that's when this light went off of like, oh no, like I don't fit into any shoes in the store. It was just like a get your act together. This is enough. And because of that, and then I had to work myself down from being so unhealthy and like going through that struggle of just sweat and tears and personal trainers, and it was humiliating, and learning how much I was eating and seeing how, I mean, I was so out of shape. I got on the treadmill and my hip blew out from walking because I had so much weight on it. Just these little things. My ankle would always twist. And then I became a personal trainer. And now I really love eating well, and I love working out, and I love talking about it. And had I not gotten that, because I went so far off the cliff with that, the biggest blessing of my life has come with being, well, that's not actually the biggest. The biggest is becoming Orthodox, but maybe the second is that I love fitness so much, and it makes my life so good. And it's because of that horrible struggle of coming out of that. And so I really, when people tell me about major struggles they're going through or they've been through, I'm like, man, what a blessing. If you really get wiped out sometime by where life really knocks you down and you have to get back up, just like a prostration, you're just totally defeated. You go all the way down to the floor, and then you have to stand back up even if you're tired. It's that mentality that I think it's a blessing. So life, I do think God gives us the struggles personal for us to direct our lives, and what a blessing to have a struggle. I think that's an indicator that God loves you. I can't remember, Matushka, maybe you can help, of what saint it said. If you're not struggling, God has left you. There's that saying of like, if you're not experiencing some tribulation in your life,
Yeah,
God has left you.
It's a very common, thought. Like there's stories of like a woman who went to the monastery was found weeping outside the gate, and when they said to her, why are you weeping? And she said, because for 3 years I haven't experienced a temptation, and I know that God has abandoned me.
Oh.
So it's a very common sentiment, that idea that it's in the struggle that which of course is exactly exercise, right? If you're on the bicycle and there's no resistance and the wheel's just spinning, you're not actually building your muscle. There has to be resistance for us to actually build muscle. And it's the same thing in the spiritual life. Without resistance, I mean, like we've said before, I'm an awesome person when I'm by myself and no one's provoking me to get angry or to,
Same.
That's funny. That's awesome.
So we need
our culture, man, I love what you're saying. I'm so struck with just the idea that our culture hates asceticism. I mean, anything about being uncomfortable. We are such a materialistic world. We have all these things for our comfort. We the Western culture is just built on comfort. Orthodoxy has to look so awful. Like, why would you? Why? And I've you know, we've all gotten these questions of like, well, why are you doing these prostrations, or why do you fast, or you know, it's so people just do not want to be uncomfortable. Yeah. 100%. Melissa, I'm sure that's your whole life. Like, working with people who just don't want to be uncomfortable.
You know, people fight a lot more against my orthodoxy than personal training.
Wow.
You know, personal training, like,
we continue to help them improve.
Yeah, but how interesting that people are more willing to accept the idea that physically we could be uncomfortable than spiritually or mentally or emotionally. That's interesting.
Somehow they're willing to accept the physical, maybe more than the spiritual. But all I have to do, if someone's full, you know, if someone says an excuse, you know, you've heard an excuse like, well, you know, my husband got me ice cream and I'm just going to have a little bit. I can totally just have a taste. I have self-control. You know, I only have a spoonful or two, but I'm looking at someone who's overweight and all I have to do is just go. And they know immediately. But if you say something like that with their spiritual life, like when they say stuff like, well, why are you standing? That sounds terrible. You know, old people, their backs are going to hurt. If I were to give them that same look, it would be a lot more attacking. It's a lot more confronting with orthodoxy. So I have to be more careful. I feel like people are much more receptive to admit when it's a physical issue than a spiritual issue. And I think that's a God thing. And it's out of my pay grade to understand that. But yeah.
I always like how Dr. Phil responds to things like that. He always asks, how's that working for you?
Exactly. Great response.
Not so great sometimes. Okay, so we've touched on some of the Protestant baggage. That was the third category that you got responses about, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of a little bit of a certain group of people now we're talking about. You want to share maybe some of the general thoughts on that one?
A huge thing was just the worship style. And I love that you just said this, Melissa. Why you're standing for 2 hours? I don't know. Our culture has just, you know, again, given us this ease in every circumstance. Chairs in churches. And even it's so interesting too, like so many Orthodox churches in America, like we have the chairs and people are like, well, why don't you use them? That was a big one, right? Just like being uncomfortable, but also being uncomfortable in other liturgical ways, right? So the difference of music, and this can be a huge one. I understand for so many people, our country's version, or maybe, I mean, I'm sure in Newfoundland, I'm sure this reaches all the way up north, but in the Western culture, I should just say the Western culture, we are immigrants, so we bring our faith with us wherever we go. And this country is unique to so many, where in Greece, you step into a church and you're not confronted with a different cultural experience. And that happens here. And so understanding the fact that if truth is truth, maybe the only Orthodox church within 2 hours of me is a church that does not speak my language. You know, that some people were saying, and that's not a gendered issue. However, I did empathize with people who were saying, what maybe can become more of a gendered issue is the idea of leaving the music of the Protestant church today, the more modern, hyper-spiritualized, hyper-emotional music. And that's something I can also sort of relate to in my own story, just the way that music is formulated to provoke emotion. It's a very real thing in the Protestant church, and we can say more like the evangelical Protestant church. That's true. It's real. It's formulated that way on purpose. That is, it's not by accident. It's more theatrical, and maybe even the people who are in that style will acknowledge that, to say that it's, though, for a good thing to get an emotional connection to your Savior. But that was a big thing that people said it was hard to leave. And then just, again, a lot of people were saying it's hard to leave the resources, the community that they had within these churches. I mean, really, all of this relates back to being uncomfortable, but there is a real reality in the cultural component, which I understand. Although I think because our world is what it is, we have the online space. I almost want to say that shouldn't be an issue for people, because, you know, maybe your community, right, you know, within your town is a different culture, worshiping in a different language. We do have so many resources online now. And that should not be the only place that you're finding your church. That's a whole other issue, which I see a lot. Online orthodoxy is not orthodoxy. However, there are resources, there are ways and avenues to learn new things. there are so many books. I'm so grateful. The amount of books that we're all able to read as we convert. Everyone has their own, like, these are my 5 books that really were life-changing. Matushka, I'm sure you have changed so many lives with your books, but we all have this. So I understand why people say that these are big holdups, but even leaving the Protestant church, a lot of it, I think, comes down to being uncomfortable. But we do have these resources out there for us. The worship music one was an interesting one. And maybe I can just put in a personal note here saying if there is that person who's listening who has that same feeling, you don't have to let that part of your background or history go. If it's not contradicting Orthodox theology, some of it does, but if it's not, that music can, beauty is beauty. We find beauty anywhere in the world. That's so much of what it means to be Orthodox. If something is beautiful, it's of God. Just end, stop, period. If it's beautiful, it's of God. So we can find beauty, but we also do seek true worship. And the early church fathers gave us all these resources and the beautiful hymns and the saints' lives to look to. So I will say worship music was a big one. And I think the emotional connection is real, and I'm not going to discount that. I will also say it can still be a part of your life. We just find the fullness in the church, in the true faith.
And what's particularly interesting about Orthodox music, our parish uses Russian style, but when we became Orthodox, my whole family ended up becoming Orthodox, but my brother's also a priest. So he's a priest here in New Brunswick, but the only church they had was the small Greek one here in this city at that time. Now the province of New Brunswick has 3 churches, 2 of which my brother serves at the moment, but that's besides the point. He serves the English Roquefort parish and the Greek parish in the city. When we lived in Greece, I had the amazing opportunity to learn Byzantine chant at a monastery just outside Thessaloniki. My sister-in-law and I would go. So I did Byzantine chant for 3 years. I can't say that I learned very well, but one of the things specifically about Byzantine chant is that it is designed to not provoke your emotions. That's actually the design of it. So instead, the emphasis is on specific words. So it's designed, for example, that when the words go, like when we talk about heaven, it goes up. When you hear sometimes the hymn, if you know, only begotten Son and Word of God. So in the Byzantine, it says, trampling down death by death, and it goes deep.
Death by death.
Exactly. And it's designed specifically to convey to you meanings of the words. So even if you didn't know the word, you would know from the inflection of the voice. Now, when they go up, they're speaking of higher things. And when they go down, they're speaking of lower things. So that's actually what's interesting about Orthodoxy is the music is specifically designed. Now, there can be another debate about Russian music. I'll leave that for someone else to discuss. I accepted.
No hot topics. I already told you that much.
There with our choir director faithfully, as he tells me, that's how I sing. But just that we actually don't want our worship to be emotional. We want our worship to be pure. And for it to be pure, it doesn't mean that there's not emotion. It doesn't mean that we're not affected, but we want the effect to be spiritual and not emotional. So sometimes you'll hear, especially if you lived in Greece, we had the parish we went to in Thessaloniki had an amazing chanter, but also the fathers of the Holy Mountain in Catechumens, who are the most famous chanters on the Holy Mountain, they would come to our parish sometimes and they would chant. And one of them, Father Daniel, he was called the Nightingale of Mount Athos because his chanting voice was so amazing. What was I going to say about that though? That when you have these people who, when they chant fully from their heart without any passions, then that is communicated to us in the church in a whole other way than it's communicated just by a beautiful voice, because it spiritually communicates to us their pure love and desire for Christ. And that pure love and desire for Christ that's communicated in their voice actually impacts us. And St. Paisius talks a lot about this, that even a chanter, even if he were to make mistakes, but with extreme piety, he will affect more people than a chanter who with maybe other things mixed in, they're going to drive people further away from the church. So again, it comes back to that like personal sanctification, but emotional music, even my, I didn't grow up Protestant, but there are certain Protestant songs that I knew of that I still, kind of like, but I like now after so many years of being Orthodox, like my heart always like, that's really what I desire to listen to. It has its place though, and the main thing being like, just that interesting reflection that Orthodox liturgical music is specifically designed to not provoke our emotion. There's something to be said of that, when you're reading the scriptures and when you're thinking about what did Christ mean in the gospel, what was being communicated by the apostles, and what has been handed down to us. Because our church isn't a museum, right? It isn't like, what did the early fathers give us? Mm-hmm. Oh, we've kept it for 2,000 years. It's, what did the early fathers give us? And the fathers and the mothers continue to give us throughout all the centuries of the world, so that it's still relevant even today. We are not a museum. The church isn't a museum. It's a living faith. It is the body of Christ. So what was true, like what Christ says, I'm the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. What was good and pure worship for the human soul in the first century is still the same today, because man hasn't changed. We haven't changed as human beings, right? So it's an interesting little side note to say, with Orthodoxy, sometimes things can seem just like, oh, it's just the style of music. And it isn't. Everything in Orthodoxy has a meaning. All of the icons, all the music, everything we use that it pulls in our five senses, it all has a meaning. We might not know it, and we might even ask a priest and he might not know it, but there are reasons for everything that exists in our church.
And that's a really good point actually to bring up, because I do see so many converts from another Christian sect having a very hard time with, and music comes up a lot. I also, my Instagram is very centered towards music because that's so much of my life, but so many people vocalize it is just so hard to leave my worship style, because when you're in these Protestant sects, that worship is worship. Like, that music is your worship. That's the way you worship. And so for them to say, like, how do I leave that? It's like, well, in my mind, I'm like, come to the Orthodox Church. We have so much. Your senses will be overwhelmed, thank God, by brilliance and by beauty. And you will learn from things that you don't even think you can learn from. And you will find worship in ways you didn't even know you could worship. I didn't know I could worship God by the way that I ate. I had no concept of that. Thank God that we have these resources. You are bringing up a wonderful point, Matushka. And I think that can be so hard for so many people to say, well, I'm leaving this big thing. And then in the Orthodox faith, it of course, raising our voices and praising God with song is huge. And I'm an advocate for that, but it is not everything, and I think that's I'm so glad you brought that up. I love that, because our worship is far more than just song. That's part of it. It's a beautiful part of it. And beauty is what draws us close to Christ, but it's not all of it.
Yeah, we have such beautiful hymns. I didn't have a very long catechism or very thorough. I was the first convert in the parish I converted in. So, they didn't really know what to do with me. Wasn't Protestant beforehand, really. Had a ton of questions, but my catechism really came from being in the church in California that had the daily cycle of services. Twice a day we had services, usually liturgy and matins, and then vespers at night. And they would read all of the hymns. And so just standing in the church day after day, and I went to church every day because I lived next door. It was a great blessing. That catechized me. So you have the idea of the melody and the beauty of the music and how it does connect more with your soul than with your emotion. But you also just have the huge amounts of theology, which is beautiful. Once you start to see the connections between these things, it's just incredibly beautiful. And I remember Frederica Matthews Green, who converted a long time ago, she once said of her first time standing in Vespers that standing there listening to the music, it was incredible because it was huge chunks of theology being thrown at you. And it's just sort of overwhelming. You want to say, wait, sing that again because it was so deep. Like that's so much more, forgive me, but just more powerful than anything else the world is going to produce, even if they have good intentions. There's the theology of the church is truly amazing and beautiful.
Humans were born for storytelling, and that's what our hymns do. Our hymns tell the story of our faith. They don't talk about it, or they don't talk about how it makes us feel. It's just the faith, purely. I mean, there's a reason our children don't have to go through a catechism when they're raised in the church before they receive communion or something, right? Because the understanding is when we're exposed to the church, we are a part of the church. It's in our bones. It's brought to us. And so much of that is through our hymns. Absolutely. Yeah.
Mariana, I think I was, when you're talking about how these people are voicing their concerns about leaving their worship, I think a lot of our culture is worshiping emotions. So they're addicted to their emotions, which is a big point of what people say about women. Like, women are too emotional, blah, blah, blah. Well, men are too, if they're in the Protestant church too. If that's your way of worshiping, you're addicted to that feeling. And so I think a lot of women too will take that they're thinking their feelings are so valid that that's the only thing that's valid, which is why you see us at, like, protests that are left leaning, because we think that our emotions and, oh, this really makes sense to me. I feel in my heart that God would want. It's this feeling that you start to worship. Whereas what Matushka was saying is, like, we learn more of the dogmatic theology, what we're actually, and you take the emotions out of it, then you're not as influenced by these secular emotional waves that I think are actually manipulated on some level to push us into these different directions with our emotions. So I think the Protestants have fallen, I mean, yoga too, we had these yoga songs that I had to really give up, just like an addiction of listening to this music, because it was but I think we can be manipulated with our emotions. And with Orthodoxy, you get pulled out of that slowly but surely. You start to realize that your emotions are powerful. We listen to them, but we are not obedient to them.
Well, we want to purify them, right? So it's like the emotion isn't actually wrong. Even anger. Anger isn't sinful. Anger is there so that we can repel sin. But it's that we need to have them in a proper order. So Orthodoxy helps by removing the just like pull at your heartstrings type of thing. It's to help us have mastery over our emotions and use them in the proper order. So there's a proper order for feeling sorrowful. There's a proper order for feeling angry. There's a proper order for every emotion that we can have. It helps facilitate the healthy use of those things.
Yeah. And none of this is to say that we don't, as a group, as Orthodox people, feel emotion in our services. Yeah, I have every Holy Week, I feel like every service, there are things that hit me like a wave. I mean, the walking through Christ's passion, specifically that week for me. I mean, so it's very much not that emotions are bad. I love that you brought not at all, but it is to sanctify us. And and I just do want to, I loved your point on how chanting specifically is to pull our own emotions out. I think that's very important. And with all of this being said, the way that we worship emotions goes into every aspect of our culture. I do absolutely see that. And I think for women specifically, that this topic bleeds into what I think I saw in every single response. It's a lot of like, well, this is how I feel. I don't feel, I just
feels wonder, right. It feels wrong.
I wonder if it's the emotional discussion here that we're having. This is actually the discussion of the whole night.
You guys are great. This is exactly where I was about to take it when you brought this up, Melissa, was the emotions. And can we maybe say that because we're not anti-emotional, right? Women tend to be more emotional than the men, but that's not a bad thing. But it needs to be purified and regulated. But you can correct me, Matushka, as always. But aren't we? The spiritual life is above emotion. It's not, anti-emotion, right? But it's higher. It's above, right?
Yeah, like we wouldn't want to confuse spirituality with feeling emotion. Those two things are not synonymous. Like spirituality is an actual state of being where we are actually being sanctified. So that means all of the negative things about ourselves, they're actually being transformed. They're being rooted out. It's like the garden of our heart. Christ is coming along and he's weeding it and he's weeding it and he's weeding it and he's cultivating the earth so that the earth is like, has the proper nutrients in it. And so that when that seed is planted, then it grows and it actually bears fruit. So that's what we mean by being purified of the passions. It's this like cultivation of the garden of our heart in order for true spirituality to grow there. Emotion is is brought into that by such things as like the compunction that Mariana was talking about, right? When we start to feel compunction, which is provoked by these amazing hymns, by contemplation of Christ's passion, and then that compunction like pushes us towards repentance. And the repentance looks like, depending on your character, because some people's dispositions are different. For some people, it will be actually shedding tears, because I feel the sorrow of feeling separated from God. I see how much my sin separates me from the one that I love. And this, I feel burdened by this, and this causes me to weep. Or for some people who don't have that inclination as much emotionally, it might just be that they sigh, that they have like they feel the weight within themselves. So we're not measuring spirituality by emotion. Emotion, just like everything else that we are made up of, thoughts, what, like the words we say, the way we act, all of those things we're seeking to be purified. And then all of those things can be used as fodder to help cultivate the garden of our hearts, so that the good seed of spirituality can grow there. And what spirituality actually looks like, it transforms the sorrow, so that now when I weep, I actually weep solely because I have distanced myself from Christ, and not because I'm embarrassed that I fell into sin, and not because I am fearful that other people will think poorly of me. Those things are all still passionate, but the emotion, the pure emotion of I feel sorrow because I have distanced myself from Christ, that's what we're seeking. So it actually is probably one of the best things that we could talk about, is the distinction between emotions and spirituality. And that is likely why so many people look at women and see like those emotional things, the desire for New Age, all that stuff. There is a good root there, but it gets stuck on that psychological level. And I think actually it was St. Porphyrius who said it, maybe not St. Sophrony. We get stuck on that psychological level, and we need to push through that in order to get to that true place where the garden of our heart has been cultivated and true spirituality comes. And that manifests as all sorts of things. It manifests as no longer feeling provoked to anger when, our husband says something that upsets us, or, and it's not going to be like all one moment. Now I've reached the plateau. Like I'm here now. I dwell up here. No, it's like up and down and back and forth. I fall and get up. You know what I mean? Like Melissa's talking about with the prostration. But anyway, that's important.
I like what Matushka is saying about the purification of the emotions, because I think before we're in the church, we can be manipulated by our emotions because we are so emotional. Like you said, I don't think emotions are bad. Obviously, God gave them to us for a reason, for all the reasons Matushka was saying. But if we're not in the church, and we can be psychologically manipulated by the news. So this feminism push, any agenda that the elite has for us to destroy us, right? They will push it on TV, in advertisements, on social media, these trends, if you will. They'll take our emotions, harness them with these psychologically manipulative catchphrases or whatever, and push us the other way. Well, if you don't feel sorry for this group of people, then you must be a racist. So, well, I'm not a racist. I hate racists. Okay, I'll go this way. And we're just kind of pushed through life. Whereas when you become Orthodox and you start to realize what worship is without the emotions, and everything starts to calm down, you are less likely to be manipulated. And I think that's probably a good selling point for women. Like, hey, women, are you tired of being manipulated by everything? Become Orthodox and you won't have to do that anymore. You can see through manipulation. I think that's a pretty big plus of being Orthodox, is the more your mind calms down, the more your emotions calm down, and they're put in their proper place, and you take that drive out of, the pushing you one way or another in the world, and you can kind of think straight and feel straight. It really helps your life, just watching people, who watch the news every day, whatever news channel you watch, if it's mainstream media, these people are really, part of their being is just being pulled every which way. They can't pray, they can't think. And so as a trainer, I see this a lot because I go to their homes. I train a lot of seniors, and all day, every day, the news is on, and they can't even when they're working out, their eyes are glued to the news. So it's and their emotions. Can you believe that happened? Oh, I know you don't have a TV. And of course I get shamed for not having a TV. Well, you need to come over here and look at how many of these kids died today. Can you believe this? And it's because it's this person's fault. And all of those emotions, and that they're affecting men too. And you're almost chastised if you don't feel that emotion. But of course, becoming Orthodox, you learn how precious your emotions are and your energy is, and where it should be directed, which is to Christ and to your own personal life and fighting the passions. And I personally, if I can help it, don't want to be influenced by whatever they care about on TV, because probably it's manipulated just to take my energy from me. So I love the Orthodox Church in that way. The closer you get to the church, the less likely you are to be manipulated, and the more likely you become strong to say no to those things. You can recognize when the world is trying to manipulate you. And then of course it comes with the nuance of like, how do you behave to people that don't know? So to be kind to those people who are trying to pull you in, like the people that are watching the news with me, oh, Melissa, how can you not look at these kids that just died? How do you say that in a nice way? Yes, that sounds terrible. Okay, let's get back to bicep curls, but that comes with orthodoxy. That doesn't come, you don't just get that. So anyway.
Well, Father Zachariah of Essex has a teaching exactly about that, Melissa, which is linked at the bottom of my page under the spiritual talks. It's a short 5-part series of videos, but he's talking about emotions, and he says, when we become emotional, he says, if I think about my grandmother and how good she was to me, and she's departed and I miss her and I get emotional, he says, take that energy and now you direct it to God. And I start praying for her soul.
Yeah.
And because now it's that prayer is energized with our, with our heart for them, our love for them. And then he says, and then you'll just keep praying and you'll just forget about any sadness that you had, And I have found that teaching so helpful that, we're not robots. Women, we all tend to be a little more emotional, some of us more than others. And to have a method, to some real steps to just direct it towards God, to have that, that good energy that God gives us, given back to him, in love and in prayer for others. I found that so helpful.
I'm glad you brought that up. My spiritual father, Father Sarah from Holland, always says, when I go in, if I'm mad at someone, I can get so mad. I think that's one of my passions. I get mad at everybody. Everybody's bad, and I'm mad at them, And so I have specific people that I'm really mad at, and he'll say, well, are you praying for them? So we need to keep a prayer list under obedience of people we pray to. And so if I'm real mad at somebody, he'll catch it, because I'll name names, and he'll be like, oh, are you praying for them? Okay. So then I realized, like, at first I didn't believe him. I don't want to pray for this person. They're mean and they're bad and I'm mad at them. And so, but over months of praying for the same person, then I start to realize, like, oh, he's fighting for salvation. This person is fighting just like I am for their salvation. And what I'm mad at is probably a sin that they're doing that I'm seeing. And this is a problem for me, because now I'm sinning because I'm angry at this person who's also fighting for salvation, but also their soul. Like, so to give it to God, saying, will you take care of your son or daughter? That has helped my soul quite a bit too. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's constant prayer for that person and forcing yourself through gritted teeth to pray for someone that you don't like. But it softens your heart and you start to see humanity differently.
Father Zacharias deals with that exact situation. There's some Russian woman in the audience that keeps saying, yes, but this woman's really bad, Father. You don't understand. He's like, no, you're supposed to be praying for her. So yeah, go listen to that. It's really, really good. Well, the last little part that people responded about was about Orthodox online content. This one's probably, I'm a little worried about this one being a little more hot topic because, well, so anyway, Mariana, why don't you let us know what people were saying about this area of online content?
Yeah, this is one I struggle with, I think maybe every day, because I think the general call is that young women are wanting to see more of themselves represented in the online world, which I understand, because a lot of the loud voices tend to be the classic ortho bro. And generally speaking, I don't really interact with that online world at all. So I think a lot of people talk about the Orthodox young male converts who are chronically online, maybe in a Reddit thread or something. And I'm not really a part of that world, but I think it affects a lot of people because they are seeing it. It's silly in my easy response. Like I would just think, okay, well, just don't see it. But people are, and that's their view of Orthodoxy, which is a shame. And however, these men also have passion to win souls for Christ, and this is one I really struggled with because I see everyone's heart, and I don't have real answers for this, but the general consensus with a lot of young women, they're saying we're not represented in the online world. My other response is, well, it doesn't matter. Orthodoxy is not online. It's in your parish. It's right there. Go seek a spiritual father. I'm sure you can find the church. Go read all of the saints' lives that we have for us. Those would be my natural responses. But I also understand, and I was the same when I was a young convert, looking to see, okay, well, what does Orthodox look like? I want to understand what it looks like day to day before I dive into this world that I don't understand. And it's so countercultural to my own world. So I understand that. And I would say, Christina, you're doing a great job of being someone in this space to offer discussion. And I like using the word soft. I think it's just like a softer discussion. My priest and I have had like talks, what would I offer up as sort of the alternative to the hardcore inflammatory ortho bro world? And I don't have an answer for that yet, but I think it's what people like you are doing, having discussions and being a woman in the Orthodox world online.
Well, I want to say thank you for that, first of all, but also that there's a lot of space here for other women to step up. And not everyone's going to resonate with me. I'm kind of weird. I'm quirky, like I'm not everyone's cup of tea. And that's okay. Like you don't have to jive with me. You can send your kids to public school. I'm not going to come after you or anything, like it's okay, really. So I sometimes worry that just by virtue of having this channel, people assume that, which we'll talk briefly in a moment here about assumptions, but
Yeah.
that people think that you have to be like that. I am saying you have to be like me, and nothing could be farther from the truth. You can wear pants, you can, send your kids to public school, all these things. And I really don't have a problem with it. The way I live my life and what I'm saying online is my opinion, unless it's, something I'm reading or something. But I think we need to maybe make a little more space which is why I invited all of you, because I felt like we have a variety of voices here. I think that's really important, but I do also think that if you're hearing things online, and I have actually had run-ins with real ortho bros, there's a lot of wonderful men online. Some of them have become my friends, really kind people who are, online for the right reasons, trying to help other people. But there are people that really come after you. I don't want to talk too many specifics, but on a video I posted, there were reaction videos and a series of reaction videos and live streams about something that was said on one of my channels. And the thing that was said was young women should have a job. If you're like a 24-year-old girl, you should be able to go out and have a job. And this, for some reason, stirred up all this trouble. And it was really shocking to me as someone who's new to being online. This isn't the world I was born or raised in. So I do see that there is a concern. But if you're seeing things like that, go to a real parish. You're going to meet real people. You're not going to, that's not what the church is really like. Anyone can say anything online. So you have to learn who to listen to and how to figure out who to listen to. Not everyone is, I'm certainly not authoritative. There's very few people online that truly are. So that would be my 2 cents on the ortho bro. It wasn't fun, by the way.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to know about that.
It was upsetting. I don't want to say it made me think about quitting, but it definitely, made me back off of certain spaces, and I'm just not engaging. I just do not engage because I was interested in the whole conversation around women and where women are at, trying to figure that out. And now there's just certain things I just don't listen to because it's not helpful to me. I get upset. People are saying crazy things out there, actual crazy things. And it's not helpful. Why would you fill your head with that? Go read a book. Go read St. Paisios or something. So.
Yeah.
But on the positive note, you're popular enough to have a reaction video made about you.
There's only like only like 3 people watched it. Don't worry. I was one of them.
No, it really shows you've really come very far for women. You're breaking the glass ceiling of the online world for women.
That's awesome.
Sorry, Melissa, you were going to say something.
I like that, the glass ceiling. Now I can't remember what I was going to say. I was probably I've had that. So I have a little YouTube channel myself, and I've had some interviews with women on there, Orthodox women, and I've had some negative comments that really hurt my feelings. So I had a similar reaction, Christina, to you. I was like, this is, I don't know if I want to continue because I'm sensitive. I think women are sensitive, and it takes a very strong person to confront these ortho bros that are wackadoo. And a lot of them have lost their minds, and they're not all Orthodox. I think some of them are just in the conservative spaces, the red pill manosphere nonsense, Andrew Tate followers or any of his offshoots, but they're brutal. They're really nasty and they can get to you. And so it's scary to have an online space. So why are, to Mariana's point, like, why are women not converting? I think we're scared to be online. A lot of the times it's a real concern, but of course, anything that's worth doing is going to be scary. And I think there is certainly benefit to being online, but they're wacky. There's some wacky stuff that is going on that I never thought I would see. There's just extreme misogyny, not just, it's in the Orthodox space too. But the ideas that Orthodoxy has that are shared among conservative spaces have really started picking up this weird misogyny thing. And then if you say anything about it, they'll call you a feminist, and that's like the biggest curse word of the day. How stupid are you that you're a feminist? I think they're mistaking women's empowerment with feminism, because they're actually not very the people that are the men that are kind of engaging in this don't really have an understanding of the history of feminism. They just think it's any woman that's trying to be empowered, which of course is what the Orthodox Church teaches from the Theotokos, that we have value inherent as being children of God.
Absolutely.
So once you become Orthodox, as a woman, like Mariana, you were saying, like, just come to the church because it's not online. You will realize with the lives of the saints that we are loved by God, and you will get your full womanhood and your full personhood in the Orthodox Church. But man, you've got to go through a gauntlet of these crazies that are online, just setting up just to smack you across the face wherever you turn, unless you start going into the Orthodox Church and you find some real people that aren't online. So I think some of those people that are online are trickling their way in sometimes, but if they're not in the church for Christ ultimately, or truth, they'll find their way out. If they're in there to take advantage of women or to have this crazy mindset, like they want that domination, that control, they're not going to last, because the church is kind of set up that way. We worship Christ. So like you were saying, Matushka, like we all, if Christ is at the center and we love Christ, that's what's going to bond us. So if something doesn't go in that, it's going to kind of fade away. What do y'all think about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think that the fact is that the faith has always been shared since the apostles. It's handed down by teaching, which you may or may not be able to get online, but also by the laying on of hands, which can only happen in a physical space. And so the internet's a resource. And just like when we were all kids and we were told, you can't believe everything you see on television, you can't believe everything you see on the internet, like some of those people aren't even, it's not even who they are. It's like a personality they take on the internet, like a weird video game or whatever, I don't know that. I would assume people, you put on a mask when you come onto the internet. And criticism isn't just internet specific. Like, I got loads of positive comments, but my book reviews, because I'm old. I'm a dinosaur. And so I wrote books instead of having a book. And so
good for you.
I have tons of reviews, right, of my books. The one review that stands out to me that I still think is absolutely hysterical is when one person said that they didn't like the book and they gave it a poor rating. And they said the only time that they read The Scent of Holiness, which is my most popular book, the only time that they read The Scent of Holiness was when it was on their bedside table and they were too lazy to get up to go into the living room to get the real book they were reading.
Oh, dang.
Like, that is the funniest thing I've ever read. We laughed so hard about it with our friends. It's just who people are. Sometimes they like you, sometimes they don't, and that's okay. And sometimes people have really odd opinions or very divergent opinions, from us, and that's totally okay. And I know it's a really beautiful trait of women that we're more sensitive. That's a really beautiful thing, but it very easily goes on into oversensitive, which is a negative thing. And it's something that one of the reasons why a women's monastery can function is because the nuns have to learn to not be oversensitive. So when someone, if they bark at you, if if you're tired, if, certain tasks need to be done quickly and all of those contexts that we know could cause some conflict, by not being oversensitive, people are able to live together in community and get past that. And it's the same sort of thing on the online space. We don't want people to say negative things because it wounds them. Forget whether or not it wounds me. That has nothing to do with it. When you act in ways that are unproductive and unkind and all, it wounds the person, right? So we don't want that. But at the same time, if we work on ourselves and push ourselves to not be oversensitive, it's actually a good opportunity for us to be able to have people have a different opinion of us or of our, a different opinion than us, or disagree with us or criticize us. And for it actually to be an opportunity for us to be okay with that. And for us to learn that at the end of the day, what should bother me is whether or not, in my confession with my spiritual father, if I've identified something that I shouldn't have said, that was wrong for me to say, or a reaction, or, just did I say or do something that I just shouldn't have done? That's what actually should be the source of the focus of our attention. And sometimes we don't realize that we've actually acted in a way that we ought not to have, or said something we shouldn't have, until we see someone's negative reaction. And then we say, I didn't realize that. Maybe there is some value in that, or you know what I mean? Maybe not completely, but maybe there's a kernel of truth in what the person is saying, and it'll help me to reflect on myself and to actually gain a little bit more self-awareness. So criticism is hard to take, for sure. And I know as a social worker who had to frequently tell myself, it's okay when people scream and swear at you, because you get a lot of money to let them scream and swear at you. It is difficult, but it is an opportunity again for that resistance of to build up our muscles by having that resistance. So I'm not making an excuse for that kind of belligerent behavior online and these weird Reddit streams and the weird propensity for people to tear other people down. But I'm just saying that we could just think of it in the positive light of it could also be an opportunity for me to have to self-reflect and to say, okay, well, I just don't want to be that way. Even if it's just that much, I just don't want to be that way. I don't think it's healthy. I'm not going to look at it. Even that, there's value in that. So it's not really a solution. It's just, I don't know, it just maybe gives a tiny bit of a different lens to that clearly uncomfortable situation that upsets quite a few people.
Yeah, and I want to be clear that we're not going after the men, because there's a lot of really great men online. I know them personally, and some of them are really struggling through. A lot of people are struggling through relationships with a spouse that is not Orthodox. Maybe the husband's come to faith first, and they have some real issues, and they're really trying to work through that. And I really pray for these guys. They're really great. So I'm really talking about a different subset of these of guys that are, as you said, aggressive, belligerent, coming on to other people's channels and making trouble, that sort of stuff. Not real conversations, but just being really nasty.
Much more interested in answers than in Christ. I think that's a lot of
But
it.
women do this too. I recently, got on Facebook for a couple of days, and then I got off, but joined all the ladies groups.
Oh, yeah.
And they are, I don't know if you're in any Orthodox ladies groups on Facebook. They are toxic.
Recently,
I had to leave.
Yeah, I recently was in one. Just a friend had suggested that there was a good conversation I should look at. there was a good conversation, but there have been many that have not been. Yeah. You're
So
absolutely correct. Yeah.
it's not just men that, have this issue is what I'm trying to say.
I think generally it's very hard for this faith can seem in some ways so black and white, so easy to just follow the rules. I'm so grateful that it's such a struggle, because the struggle lies in ourselves in the faith. Like we are individuals, but we are to follow after Christ. And so it's not black and white for everyone. We have our own spiritual, we have our prayer rule that is for us, talked through with our spiritual father, right? There are ideals with fasting. There might be ideals in modesty. This was a whole other discussion that we just had on my Instagram. There are beautiful ideals, and we want to strive towards perfection, but most of us are not perfect. And we are all just struggling towards salvation. And I think it can be very easy. In some ways, maybe it can be easier to follow a legalistic view of the Orthodox faith than actually live in it. And I think there's a lot of people who live online. And I also recognize there are people who live hours from churches and they cannot be a part of a physical community. So they look online for some sort of sense of what is this faith. I mean, I've had so many DMs, people just saying, what do I do? There's no church within 5 hours of me. That's a reality in this country. What do I do? And their only resource is online. And so when you see these very legalistic views of the faith, I think that can be very discouraging. However, there are so many now, I think there are so many people trying to combat that, putting truth out there. I think ancient faith has done a great job of putting so many online resources out there for us that are under spiritual eyes. They are under eyes of priests and bishops, and they are very much within the church, good voices within the church, not just people doing their own thing, which I also am not saying is wrong. We're kind of doing that, but there are resources out there for people who truly don't want to be a part of that legalistic online scene. But some of these Facebook groups are that. I have seen that. So the Reddit threads, like, just don't even go there. It's not worth it.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to mention is that with these guys coming in, maybe with some pretty radical ideas, everyone comes to the church with bad ideas, and it takes us all a long time to work through those. So if the young women are going to start coming to church, they're going to start coming to church with bad ideas. I still have bad ideas, and I just don't know which one of my ideas is bad yet. So it just takes a long time to sift through your own ways of thinking and to get rid of that. So on the one hand, I don't want to be part of these guys, or the ladies. Like, everyone is going to come as they are, and it's a process to find that healing and to align ourselves with Christ over, many years, hopefully. Any other thoughts on the online content?
I have one more quick encouragement. If anyone's
Sure.
listening who is a priest's wife, there were several pleas for, we would love to hear more from priest wives. So Matushka, thank you for your books. But I think there I received a couple messages, and even some since that conversation, of people just saying, we would love to hear just more of what the experience is from the little mothers in the church, who are so often doing the work, the silent work, which is the important work. But if many of us are little mothers of our own home doing the silent important work, and what encouragement. And so if anyone's listening who feels like that could be them, there is a call for that. People are asking for that. Women are asking for that leadership. Not every parish has a Matushka, Korea, Presbytera. There, not all priests are married. And I think some women are also just looking for that guidance. So I'm putting that out there if anyone's listening.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. And I just wanted to end on a little bit of a fun note, talking about different assumptions that people have coming into the church. There was one DM, I think, right in your story that had this. So here's assumption number 1. All Orthodox women are crunchy and wear neutrals. Any thoughts on this? Are you allowed to wear like bright yellow and pink polka
This is
dots?
an interesting one, isn't it? Because there was just a modesty discussion on my Instagram where we do want to acknowledge that we don't need to draw attention to ourselves within the liturgy. That's not our place. Anyone, men or women. However, there's also something in our culture right now of minimalism and straying away from things that are loud, which is interesting, but God's creation is also loud and beautiful and full of color. So of course it's allowed. Of course it's allowed, but there is some trend, right? So we also have to acknowledge the people who are maybe popular on Instagram are following trends. That's how the algorithm can pick them up. And of course you can wear color. Of course you can wear color. That was my response.
Just like we see in all of these icons. I mean, how many neutrals are you finding in an icon? You're not. And even
maybe just the monastics, right? Like,
but even still, like St. Anthony wears red and blue. He wears red and blue, the father of monasticism of the desert. So, like, I'm not saying we need to wear. I happen to like bright colors, so I wear a lot of bright colors. But I'm just saying, like, we can look around our churches and see for ourselves that, of course, it can be an assumption, and that sometimes assumptions are based on our experience, right? Mm-hmm. And I do happen to be a crunchy person, but I wear bright colors. But anyway, there's lots of things in our church that dispel those assumptions very quickly.
Yeah, you're allowed to wear.
It's interesting. I think the crunchy thing is so interesting because it is maybe a majority of the vocal Orthodox women, but I see that coming from a beautiful place, right? Of us wanting to sort of return to nature as God intended it. There's also probably a little bit of standing up against corporations. I mean, the Orthodox Church is so just like, we are our own we're fine if people don't like us. We're fine not listening to other people. So maybe we're inclined towards that anyway. But that was an interesting one of, no, you don't, there's no formula to be an Orthodox woman. There's not a formula you have to follow. But I do see so many Orthodox women following this more natural or holistic way of life. But I think it's in seeing the beauty in nature. I think it's seeing the beauty of God's design for what the world was to be, which we have really, strayed far from it. But there's not a formula to be a woman. So that one was interesting to me.
Yeah, you won't see it as much among ethnic Orthodox from traditional Orthodox countries. You're not going to find a lot of crunchy. Like, that's not the style. So that's my experience. I lived in Greece 6 years. People dress up really, really nice with their best clothes really nicely to go to church. So it's just different experiences. It depends where you live. It depends what you've seen, But we have to remember, like, Orthodoxy is so massive. It isn't just the United States. It isn't just North America. It's an entire world of Orthodoxy is in the entire world. And unfortunately, this idea of like this convert cradle mentality, which I personally don't at all buy into. I believe if you're an Orthodox Christian, you're an Orthodox Christian, full stop. It doesn't, like, St. John Chrysostom wasn't baptized until he was older. Is he a convert or is he a cradle? Does it matter? No, it doesn't, But the point just being, Orthodoxy it's for the whole world, and it exists in the whole world. So Orthodoxy isn't just the current climate right now in certain places. Orthodoxy is bigger than that. It crosses centuries, and it crosses cultures, and it crosses, trendy clothing.
Yeah. So you can wear anything you want to, not anything you want to wear, but you can wear, you can style.
There's a spectrum is the point. And it would not represent Orthodoxy properly for us to make it seem as if it's certain things are common. Certain things are common in certain places, and in other places, other things are common.
And you can eat, Twinkies and drink Diet Coke. I don't recommend it, but that's
not
what my mom lived off of.
Unless that Twinkie happens to be fasting, which
I think it is. I don't know why I know that. But anyway, yeah, you can, you come as you are. So only Orthodox women only homeschool their children. Can you send your kids to public school, private school?
Yeah.
Ladies? Yeah, of course you can. I'm not going to come after anybody.
Yeah.
I know this might seem silly to say, but
in Greece, homeschooling isn't legal. Okay, so unless you happen to have a passport from another country, you're sending your children to public school. And Greece is an Orthodox country. So again, these assumptions are based on just what we're happening to see maybe on the English-speaking world in an online space, you know? It's not orthodoxy. It's just a specific area.
Absolutely.
Are Orthodox women allowed to wear pants?
No comment.
What a hot topic. The allowed to is interesting.
We're gonna take it's the allowed to, isn't
It's
it? But
the
we're gonna take
allowed
church
to.
attendance out of this. Let's take church attendance out of this because that gets more hot. But just at home, are you allowed to wear pants?
Of course.
Well,
In your space.
yeah,
But this is the interesting discussion, because I think this assumption came from, it's not just the Orthodox world that is finding its place online as being like an exclusive religion right now. There are many like Orthodox Jewish influencers and Islamic influencers showing what their life looks like, and that is a very real reality for many religions, that there are certain required garments for everyone, full stop. Right? So within our individual churches, there might be more normal things. I typically am not one to wear, I don't know the last time I would have worn pants to a church event personally, whether it be like a gathering or a liturgical service, something happening within the church. But there are religions where that is a requirement. So I understand where the assumption is coming from. Women are genuinely asking, okay, well, I'm seeing Orthodox women only in skirts in many contexts. So I understand that one was interesting to me, because I'm like, I do see that, because I also have seen videos of women putting themselves out there in other religions where, no, not even in the home, not even at the beach, not like they're, full stop, all women in this one religion have to do everything the same. So I think that came from that, I would assume.
yeah,
The
it is.
thing
I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say I am on Instagram a lot more than I should be, and there's there's Muslim women influencers at the gym, and this is a brand new thing, and it's in my algorithm. From what I understand with Orthodoxy is we should not be drawing attention to ourselves in general, in all aspects. Being flashy in general is kind of like, and I think as you get older too, you don't really want all that. I don't know. That's kind of how I feel in the gyms. I don't really want attention. I'm there to work out and leave. Well, if you're dressing in a skirt at the gym, you're going to draw attention to yourself. No one wears a skirt. You're asking for everyone to look at you, because that's not what the norm is in our specific part of the country for gym culture. So you can wear something that is conservative in your own way, however you want to do it, that doesn't draw attention to whatever your body parts, in a flamboyant way, that's not over the top conservative, like wearing a skirt on a treadmill. So that, for me personally, that's kind of how I take it, is you do the best you can in whatever world you're living in, and to the best Orthodox standard that you can, that you discuss with your spiritual father, or you feel like this is what I'm doing for Christ in my way. That, does that make sense? Like, I think that we shouldn't be drawing attention to ourselves, flashing our religion. Look at me, I'm more pious than you because I'm more conservative than you. You should be too. Traditionalism is the best. You should wear So I personally have had a lot of feedback on that. I had one gentleman tell me that I should be ashamed to go to Whole Foods in my personal training outfit, to go shopping for groceries. Meanwhile, I have like 5 appointments. I'm running all over town to go work out with people. And he was shaming me for wearing pants to the grocery store. So it is, to each their own. I'm 100% in support of women doing the best they can. It is brutal out there. I have seen women attack women on their outfits. I've seen men attack women. I've seen, we attack ourselves ever since we were born with these advertisements of how we should look. You're not sexy enough. You're too sexy. You're not flashy enough. Go ahead and paint your nails. Come on, do it up. Don't do that. You don't want to there's so much that I'm a fan of just being like, hey, come to church, do the best you can. And sometimes you're going to want to dress up a little bit more. Sometimes you don't. I mean, we change, So that's kind of how I feel, is we really should be supportive and really patient with women, because it's really difficult to be a woman, especially when you become Orthodox of how to become. I think it's a natural thing as you become more and more Orthodox, you naturally tend to become more conservative in the way you dress, more modest in the way you dress. But it's a natural thing and should come from the heart. No one should be pressuring you. They will be pressuring you, but yet that's another hurdle that you just have to go over and do the best you can. And sometimes you're going to screw up and wear something that offends someone. Sometimes you're going to go the other direction, but we just keep going every day, trying to refine in the best way we can, and hopefully you have supportive women around you and you can base what you're doing off of what they do if you respect them. And I think that looks different for everybody. And like Matushka said, in different areas of the world are going to look different.
Yeah.
So the one addendum that I don't really want to add, but I'm going to have to do it. So I had, my theology professor in Greece, he's a dogmatic theologian, and he would tell us, dogmatic theology, you need to understand it's a life, it's not a textbook. So he had a lot of personal experience with other Ephraim Katonaki, Saint Ephraim Katonaki, and Saint Paisius of the Holy Mountain. So I try, as he used to say, εγώ νομίζω, my opinion is, doesn't exist in the Orthodox Church. So I often give my opinion, but I try at least to draw a little bit on the writings of the saints. So what I would just share is two contemporary saints talk about this. So if people are interested, they can seek out those books and they can find out what they say. St. Porphyrius talks a lot about women wearing pants, and so does St. Paisius. So I'm not going to get into exactly what they say because I won't be able to precisely convey exactly their words. And it would be more impactful, I think, if people wish to know what they said, that they would seek it out themselves for themselves so that they can decide what they think of what the saints say. The only thing I'll add of myself is that I understand that we can wear certain things and it can make people seem like we do it on purpose to draw more attention to ourselves. Sometimes the way we dress is going to draw more attention to ourselves, whether or not, so I'm just going to be really frank. I was a social worker. I worked in social housing, which means I would go into people's homes that were full of drugs, that were full of animals, that were full of garbage. I personally always wore a dress or a tunic. I didn't wear pants. So I understand that I could see on my coworker's face what they thought of that. I didn't do it to draw attention to myself. I knew it drew attention to myself. That wasn't my intention. My intention was because for me, I didn't want to dress that way. So it was awkward many times. And the one time when I chose to wear a long skirt and we had to go deal with a guy who was firebombing his girlfriend's car. And I was like, man, I might have to run away from this psycho. I just hiked up my skirt so that it was a shorter skirt. And I made a joke of it, But the point is, I'm just throwing out there. People can do what they want. But I wouldn't want people to feel like because it specifically draws attention to you. Yeah, I drew lots of attention to myself. I could tell. Sometimes I got comments from my coworkers, not nasty, but a little bit of comments. But the point is, this one thing, if I remember the quote correctly from St. Paisius, is where there's a will, there's a way. And he's specifically talking about that issue. So that's the only thing I'll mention about that is I don't think it's impossible, but it's up to their own. And if people wish to know what the saints say about it, the saints do talk about these things. These are things that contemporary saints have covered. If that's of interest to you, I encourage you to seek it out. And if it's not, that's totally cool. I just thought that I'd throw in a little bit of a different perspective. And forgive me if that was offensive. I just wanted to share that.
Not at all. And I'll reiterate St. Paisios, what he writes on modesty in general. And it's also more sort of just embracing womanhood in this culture, which is sort of rejecting true femininity. It's important. But I think a lot of what this assumption comes from is, or maybe more to accurately convey the assumption from what I see women asking, is it a requirement to wear dresses as an Orthodox Christian? Do you know what I mean? And I think that's where our faith is so different, right? So you brought up so wonderfully, it is, you have to go read it. You have to go figure it out. In reality, nobody should be looking at their brother or sister and saying, hey, to be a proper Christian, you have to do XYZ. Unless it's your spiritual father, and unless you are getting specific direction with that spiritual father you trust, that's totally different, right? But like, we are not to look at each other and point fingers. We look at our own plate when we're fasting, right? However, Melissa, I think you said it well too. The longer we are Orthodox, generally speaking, people become more holy. That's the goal, right? Lord willing, we are all on our walk. And I will agree with that. So, right. So like in my current phase of life, I have thoughts about head covering and wearing dresses in church. I have some very serious thoughts about that on what I read in scripture and what the saints have said. And yes, modern saints too. I'm so glad you brought this up. But this is the interesting, I think, distinction from other visually, like from the outside looking intense religions, where we are different, is that no, it's not the requirement. Like if you walk into a church and you have pants on, at my parish, you won't get kicked out. Maybe at some parishes, some babas would come up to you and be like, what are you doing? Just because of the cultural aspect of all this. But generally speaking, that's not what's taught. Like, it's not taught that you are sinful for wearing pants, but in some cultures, in some traditions, and some religions, it is. And so I think what both of you said is actually so wonderful. And Matushka, I don't think you're bringing up like a controversial. I love what you said. I think that is what should be said, right? Anyone listening should go read. That is what we should be doing. We should all be taking up our own cross and walking and not looking around necessarily, but moving forward. I'm so glad you said that. I think it's so true. But it is hard, right? And this is part of where it's hard to be a voice in the online space. We want to share our thoughts. So my own personal walk, I have my own thoughts in the way that I personally live. And I think a lot of people are looking for, just give me the template that I need to follow, but that we're not going to, I don't think you can look at someone and say, this is the XYZ template. Although that would be so easy. It would be easy to have the legalism. I think it would be easy to have this is the one path. But yeah, one of our most beautiful saints, Saint Mary of Egypt, is depicted, in an immodest way. But she recognized her immodesty. I mean, it's not, she fully recognized her sin, but we still see that part of her as we, venerate her icon. We still see that part of her to recognize that's part of her story. There are things we can walk away from, but she did not have to become modest physically to be holy. She was found naked in the desert, right? So I don't think that's the requirement to be Orthodox, and I do hope women can see that, step in the door first, and then as we step in the door, then there's a walk that we can make, Lord willing, with a community and with a spiritual father. I think that's so important too.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is our last question, so we'll just wrap up here. But I think getting into Saint Mary of Egypt is kind of its own subject, which maybe we should set aside for a moment. But I mean, I agree with Matushka in that this is the actual maybe standard of the church throughout the ages, and not just the church, but actually everywhere. Like, this was just the common thing that men dressed a certain way, women dressed a certain way. However, I guess my concern would be, I know a lot of women who are not Orthodox. I know two women that are very close to that don't even own a skirt, and they're extremely uncomfortable. Like I know that when they've had to dress up for like a wedding or something, had to go get something, it was a really emotional experience for them. That was really difficult. So I guess my point in this question was kind of a little bit to what Mariana was saying in the end is this a barrier to stepping in the door? Like I said, we all come to the church with maybe some ideas that are off or that need to be healed. But if someone is looking into the church and you only have pants and that's where you're comfortable at right now, is that really a barrier to stepping in the door?
I mean, it's only a barrier if the parish doesn't permit it. Because I know I've been to
that's true.
the cathedral in San Francisco when I first became Orthodox, and I thought, oh, it's San Francisco. People will just dress whoever they want. I mean, I had skirts, but like, I remember specifically thinking, it's California. I don't know what I'm going to see. I'd never been to California. I was only like 22 or something. And when I got there, they were like forbidding people from coming if they didn't have long skirts and long sleeves. So all I would say is, of course, if, we wouldn't want anyone to be prohibited from coming, but they will be more uncomfortable if they happen to show up at a parish and the parish says, you're not welcome because you're not wearing a skirt, which isn't common, but it does happen.
Right.
The fact that it
Right.
does happen in San Francisco was shocking to me. And maybe it doesn't now. That was 20 years ago, but that's the only thing I would say about that, Hopefully that wouldn't be someone's experience. Or if it was, they would just be like, okay. And then the next time they wouldn't like, it wouldn't be a barrier. It would just be like, oh, okay, next time I'll show up with whatever, but so hopefully it wouldn't be a barrier would be what I would say.
Yeah. It's interesting. I thought these little assumptions we'd go through really quickly and it'd be like, well, of course this or of course that. But I think this really shines a light on some of the problems with online conversations in general, is that they're in these little short, sound bites. And it's like everyone here just had something very valid to say about this issue, which is actually really complicated and, personal, like speak to your spiritual father, and that's why, that's another reason why the internet can be so dangerous in this area, that seek out real relationships with the real spiritual father and, take what people say online with a grain of salt, including all of us, but talk to people that really know, right? An embodied real relationship. But hopefully you can get an idea that these topics are actually pretty nuanced and there's a lot to discuss. It's not
and it's tied to the spiritual life again. Like
it is.
It isn't about legalism, right? Like when St. Porphyrius talks about this theme, he actually gets into the actual impact certain garments of clothing has on the spiritual, on the actual, like, I think he says the nature of the person. So when the saints of the church, the men and women who were sanctified, they're not just like wise people, and they're not just knowledgeable people. Oh, they read some good books. No, they have a living experience of God, and they're able to communicate the truth to people. And that's why they're valuable. It isn't just that they're knowledgeable. And so it isn't about legalism. It's about what is profitable for my soul and what is unprofitable. And I might have my opinions about that, and I might read all sorts of different opinions about that. But if we genuinely want to seek what does God want from me, then the best way to do that is to actually go to the source. And the source is communicated to us through the saints. And that's the way Christ set it up. When he had the apostles and they had disciples, and it went on from there through the bishops and the priests and the teachings of the faith. And so we have people like St. Mary of Egypt, Yeronim Macrina in Greece. They're all a part of that. Yeah, they didn't have the laying on of hands. They're not like liturgical priests. They're a part of the royal priesthood. And so the holy saints will communicate the truth of our faith and what's profitable for us and what's unprofitable for us. And that's, a wellspring of knowledge for us to seek. And whether we're ready or not for that is a whole other thing. Like that's okay. Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. But the facts are, it exists. It's out there. We need to learn to seek it. But unfortunately, our society and just our lack of saints in this part of the world has made us think that it's as valuable to go online to find out information as it is to seek out a saint. And prior to, the printing press, the only way you did that was to actually seek out a person who feared God so that you could learn to fear God. That's our tradition. It wasn't until recently that books were even published that people could seek it in another format. They might be able to hear stories from other people, but those people had to have firsthand experience of a saint for it to make sense for them, right, to receive it. So again, I would just throw that back out there that our faith it's not legalism, because it is not a religion.
The kingdom.
It is a kingdom. And that is our faith. It's a kingdom. It's not a religion. So we're not going to have the same legalism that all the other religions that are man-made and that are diluted because they're man-made have. It's a revelation and it's a kingdom. Yeah.
Thank you, Matushka, for that. I think we'll end there, but I do, even though I agree with you on this particular subject, I do worry that that people get to the point where they say, I've even had a friend say to me, it's too hard to be Orthodoxy, right? And they start thinking, right, we don't think this way in the church, but from the outside, they're thinking, well, I have to do all these things. And I'm going to have to go buy a new wardrobe, and I'm uncomfortable, it's a long list. And it's like, no, that's not what it's about. And I think you're perfectly, exactly correct that we have to separate these things of what does the church teach and keep that pure, And then like, here's where I'm at. And it's like actually way down here, but that's okay. Like God still loves you. Christ is still healing you. And you just, you work through those things with your spiritual father. And, that's the beauty of our faith, right? It's the pureness, and then God humbles himself and like accepts us, even though we're not getting all the check marks, So I appreciate you putting a bow on that conversation, because it can be really difficult for people to hear these things, So I want to thank you all again for being here. It's a lovely time. Forgive me for going over. Matushka knows I'm notorious for going over time here, but I was...
because she says like these beautiful, synthesized, quick, easy answers. And I'm like, let me tell you the story while I wave my hands around. And it takes a couple extra hours when I'm featured. Sorry, guys.
Well, I appreciate it, Matushka and Melissa and Mariana. So please tell us where people can find you online. Why don't you start, Melissa?
Sure. So my YouTube channel is Melissa Cecilia. I also have an Instagram, Trainer Melissa. So that's where you can find me. And if you're interested in personal training, I do things online as well. And it's www.trainermelissa.com. I only train women and seniors. So if you have a parent that needs a little bit of mobility, I actually got something great out of my yoga training. I'm really good with balance and mobility and flexibility. So we can do that. But that's where you can find me.
Great. Thank you. And Mariana, forgive me.
No, you're fine. Either's fine. You can find me at A Little Liturgical Life on Instagram. It's just sort of showcasing a little bit of our liturgical life, but sort of a heavy focus on family life and music and what that looks like in the church and in your home.
Great. Okay. Thanks for being here.
And if you remember what blogs are, I used to have one for about 10 years. You can find that blog. It's called Lessons from a Monastery, Wiser Than the World. And then again, because we established that I'm old, you can find my books that are like readily available in the States, these two especially, that are published by Ancient Faith, and the new one from Alexander Press. It will be, I would assume, if not already, St. Vladimir's Press will sell this, because they sell all of Alexander Press's books. So this, I'm hoping, Christina and I talked about maybe doing talk about it at some point, but my intention with this book was to give a realistic picture of what it looks like to be a priest's wife. So I hope that that's communicated in the book. It's letters to a fictional character, but also sort of a composite parishioner, who I named Theophila, because St. Luke writes his gospel and his Acts of the Apostles to Theophilus.
Yeah.
So it's very personal. It's very specific to, being in a small community, but not applicable to, what is it to be the co-struggler of a man of God who seeks to be a living sacrifice to spread the gospel.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Matushka. And thanks again for everyone for being here. Hope you enjoyed the discussion, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina.
Thank you so
God
much.
bless you all.